Brent here with Bring Your Own Tools, and on today's episode, we are installing wallpaper. If you'd like to learn, keep on watching. Let's get started. And just like any other good wallpaper project, it all starts with the wallpaper, and we are going to be incorporating and utilizing the Magnolia Homes by Joanna Gaines Wallpaper. It's a beautiful style, had great reviews, and it's beautiful olive oil branches, and who doesn't love a good olive oil branch, right? I first start by taking a few measurements of the height and total length just to account for how many rolls I'm going to have to purchase. I had to purchase 2 for this one wall because each roll comes with 56 square feet and I had approximately 100. Now I do a general layout review just to see approximately where the panels of the wallpaper will be placed, and then proceed to prepping out an area for cutting and spraying the wallpaper prior to installing. Now I put a layer of visqueen down, 1 because I want a very clean work surface, and 2 I will be spraying moisture and I don't want the cardboard to suck up the moisture that I'm spraying. So there you go. Now I use some general painter's tape just to indicate exactly where my pinpoints are for the pattern. The fact that this pattern is very random comparatively to some wallpapers is an indicator that you have to make sure and be clear as to what points you're going to be matching up on each single piece you cut. So I need to make sure that I'm very careful, especially with this first piece, prior to cutting all the rest, because I want to make sure, 1, I have a proper length, and 2, it's going to match up perfectly with the next panels that I'll be cutting in sequence. Now, an important note to think about, especially when cutting, is that you're not cutting the exact size that you need the panels to be. I'm cutting approximately 3 to 6 inches extra on both the top and the bottom of the panels. That way, there's plenty extra for me to cut off once I place the panels into position. Now the pattern does repeat every 24 inches approximately, but I still like to apply a bit of blue painter's tape to the top and bottom of all panels, just so it makes it a little bit easier to note exactly which corner needs to meet up with each panel prior to me applying it to the wall. Now I flip the stack over and then apply another layer of visqueen over the entire stack, just because I'm going to be spraying in this location and I don't want to get my overspray onto the panels I'm not ready to install yet. Now this wallpaper does have a water activated adhesive base, and I am using a high output spray bottle, and there are a plethora of different types of sprays you can use, but the key is just having consistent overall contact with moisture over the entire surface. That's why you also lay the pieces onto themselves to ensure that you have proper adhesion and proper moisture over the entire surface. Now, if there's one tool you don't have to have, but it would make life a lot easier, it would be a laser level. Yes, the beauty of a laser level just makes life so much easier when you are installing this, just because you can follow that perfect red line all the way up and all the way down, that you can ensure the fact that that is going to be perfectly level. I did draw a line, as you can see there, but just in order to make sure that I had a proper and perfect straight line all the way down, I grabbed my laser level and went off of that. Now the tool that I'm using right there is a silicone roller, which just gives you the ability to get a better hold and a better adhesion base when pressing down on the surface. You can only press down so hard with your hand, but with a perfect little roller like that, you can get a tremendous amount of force and pressure on that seam evenly and precisely. Now, a tool that you're going to have that makes life a lot easier is a very sharp blade. And the blade that I am using is actually a snap-off blade system, where it actually has approximately 10 to 15 little blades on it itself that you can actually snap off of when they become dull. And you want to have a perfectly sharp blade for this type of application, because the cleaner the cut, the cleaner it's going to look and more professional it's going to look in the end. Now for this first panel that you're installing, you do want it long on one side of the adjacent wall. Now this is just because you want to have a side that you specifically cut and use a razor blade for, versus something that you're just going to be laying right up against. That will ensure that you have the best fitting panel possible. So now that we have the first panel done, and trust me, the first panel was definitely the hardest in this bunch, it is now time for the second panel. And now the second panel we spray down vigorously with the spray bottle, and the one thing to note that I learned in this process is the more moisture the better. Now I preface that by saying you're not going to be dousing this with a gallon of water, but you do want a considerable amount of water on this back panel because you want to make sure that the adhesive releases properly and you have proper adhesion over the entire surface. I wasn't getting that with the first two panels, but I was definitely getting that with every other panel after that. Now, also note is that this adhesive is removable. It's not your wallpaper of yesteryear where it literally is chemically and mechanically bonded to the wall. So you can only use some hardcore stripper to remove it, or just take a full sledgehammer to the wall and just remove the entire surface with the drywall. But that just generally adds a lot of time and energy that we don't have. And if any of you have actually removed old wallpaper, it is the worst thing you could possibly do. Well, not the worst, but just it's miserable. And I don't want to put anyone else through that, right? Now, another tool that's very nice and handy to have while installing this wallpaper is a 6-inch taping knife. Now, this is a plastic knife that I can just evenly spread across the entire surface to ensure that I have even coverage over the entire thing. And then I can go back with my silicone roller and really apply more pressure to it. And it really sped up the installation time, which is always preferable and nice to see. I did occasionally use a damp sponge, especially where there was areas in which I cut, just because some of those corners might have just been slightly raised at some points, but the sponge itself tends to get in all those little nooks and crannies and was able to reduce that. Now, if you come across an outlet box or another item you have to cut around, it's fairly easy, especially when you're accounting for the trim plate that goes around it, because that's going to cover up all of those loose ends. But just make sure you have proper alignment from the adjacent wallpaper prior to cutting it out, just to make sure you have the holes in the right locations. As for all the tools that I'm using in this video, I'll make sure and leave a link in the description box below on where to actually purchase them, because they were all quite helpful in this entire process. Now, if you come across an area which you have an outside corner where the wallpaper is going to be butting up against, just make sure you have a very sharp blade, cut the edge, then use your silicone roller to roll off that edge and finish it off with your sponge, because the sponge just tends to add the perfect mixture between moisture and pressure to lay that edge flat and clean against the other adjacent wall that is paint. And you're going to be looking at this edge quite often, so you want to make sure it looks good. As for the final finishing touches, go ahead and install your trim plates on all your electrical components. And what I do on all seams is actually caulk all the seams to the base or the adjacent wall that it's connected to. This just gives it a nice, perfect, seamless edge and adds just a bit more professional look to your entire project. And let's just say, $6 tube of caulking that makes your job look better is always going to go down as a win in my book. Now, I must say right off the bat, that is one beautiful, sexy beast of an accent wall with amazing wallpaper. I mean, look at that. You can barely even see the seam.